Welcome to another episode of Fixer Brazil podcast, where we talk to filmmakers, producers, directors of photography, storytellers from all over the world about their experiences filming here in Brazil and around the planet. Today's guest is wildlife filmmaker Paul Reddish. Paul began his career at the BBC in 1981, starting as researcher and eventually becoming a series producer. Along the way, he directed and produced numerous wildlife and science documentaries and worked several times with Sir David Attenborough. In 1997, he left the BBC to found his own company, Free Spirit Films, continuing to produce natural history and science documentaries around the world. Paul has directed and produced more than 25 films, including projects such as Attenborough in Paradise, The Future is Wild, and the award-winning documentary Hummingbirds, Jeweled Messengers. Paul has also filmed in Brazil several times, including working with Fixer Brazil on wildlife productions. Paul, it's a pleasure to have you at Fixer Brazil podcast, and I want to start at the beginning. You originally studied psychology and animal behavior, so how did you move from science into filmmaking?
By accident, the truth be told, like so many things in my life, but a BBC film crew came to make a short film on the work of my professor, and being a sensible professor, he said, "Oi, you can do that." I'm too busy to deal with them. And I just realized when I worked with the BBC crew that was the job for me. That was the perfect job for me. It combined my fascination in all things, my love of science, and an artistic side, a creative side, where you would take scientific facts, find stories, and hopefully communicate. And nothing has changed in 50 years. I've just always wanted to communicate, tell stories, infuse people with this wonderful world we live in. That's the kind of shorthand I then applied to the BBC, and this is for everybody, really. And they said no. I couldn't believe it. They said no, they didn't want me. Rejection. And the answer is, and if there are any people starting their careers listening to this and watching this, perseverance, perseverance, perseverance. No matter how good you are or how good you think you are, you often just have to stick at it until you can make the breakthrough. And it can be very hard and demoralizing. But all I can say as advice is keep sticking at it. So there you go. That is 1980.
Long time ago.
Which is way before any of my recent students were born, but that's enough. There you go.
What kind of films or TV shows inspired you? Why were you interested in filmmaking at that point?
I enjoyed the science output from the BBC. At that time, they had a wonderful strand, as they call it, independent, not connected films, but shown regularly, like once a week. And there was a 50-minute, very serious documentary called Horizon. And that's where I wanted to go. But as I said, they said no. And I went back and they said no. And then I wrote to the BBC in Bristol that made the wildlife films, because that was my number one passion, was zoology and animal behavior psychology, as you said. And they foolishly said, yes, come down. They weren't taking any risks. They gave me a contract for 3 months.
All right.
And I thought, well, we'll see. I mean, it's as much their gamble as mine and then the rest is history, as they say. I think I started at the BBC in June 1981. That's right. And my first child, my son, was all of 4 months old. So it was a big a really big gamble to do this, to give up a career in academia up in Edinburgh University and go and do this. But I knew that I would always be happier making films than actually being a scientist. I'd probably be a terrible scientist, and I might be. Some people think I'm a terrible filmmaker, but we have made some interesting films in our times.
Awesome. And along the years, you worked your way up to series producer and director. So I'm just asking you, what were like the most important lessons you learned during this period, like building this career and the beginning of your filmmaking works?
Gosh, well, the conventional career pathway, and it's slightly different in some places these days, is, as you say, you start as a researcher and then you become an assistant producer, then a producer director, then a series producer, and then if you could, unless you can avoid it, you'll end up being an executive producer. Research, just do your research. Don't stop when you've just got you found one paper. Go back, dig down, read all the scientific papers, make sure you understand them. That's where the gold is. That's where the basics of your story. You have to have not just scientific validity. You have to have a scientific story, something that's really interesting, and you've got to find a way of telling it. But it's very easy to go, right, I've been asked to find out all about this hummingbird. Well, there it is. I've looked it up. No, go and talk to the scientists. Go behind that. Go and look at, is there another hummingbird that might tell that story in a better way? You can never do enough research. Of course, in the real world, you'll get 3 weeks and that's it. That's your time, done your research. But really, never stop. Just keep going and let somebody else tell you you've got to stop and start making the film. But science is generating fascinating information all the time, and we are lucky to be able to dig into that and find fascination and be able to communicate that. That fascination is the greatest communicator of all, Attenborough. That's what he's all about.
Sure. And one of the greatest science communicators and from our time is Sir David Attenborough, which is turning 100 this year in 2026 when we are recording this episode. And you worked with him in many projects, for example, Attenborough in Paradise and among others.
Courtship seems to be some kind of game, a variation of I'm the King of the Castle, perhaps, only with a very special prize.
Well, I met him just like meeting someone walking down a corridor, really, because he was based in London and never moved to Bristol, even though the BBC Bristol housed the Natural History Unit. But he was always a great friend of the Natural History Unit and would come down and do commentary. So you would meet him. And then, curiously, not the BBC, but ABC Australia contacted me and said, we want to make a film with David and we'd like you to direct it. Way! Fantastic. So I immediately agreed to it. And the film was a short film, 30-minute film, all about probably, well, I think he is the greatest wildlife artist around, called Bill Cooper, who's based up in Northern Australia. And so I made that film with David, and it was a great pleasure. I had a local Australian crew, which were excellent. And we had a great time, and David and I hit it off. And I realized in making that short film that if there was one passion greater than any other passion, and David is a hugely enthusiastic, passionate person, it was Birds of Paradise. So I thought, wow. So I said to David, we just made this film with the bird artist, and he has a bird of paradise in his garden, believe it or not. Why don't we just make a film of Birds of Paradise? They're your number one passion. They're utterly amazing birds. They just do the most extraordinary things. It's great visual television, and you are a wonderful storyteller. Let's do it. And his first reaction, which I think was a very honest one, is you'll never do it. They're almost impossible to film. And he was right. But I'm not known for taking no for an answer. So I just said, no, I can do it, David. We can make this film. And against all the odds, and we've got quite a few ups and downs, we, over the next 2.5 years, it took 2.5 years, we went to New Guinea and Northern Australia, but primarily New Guinea, 5 times. And had camera crews in the field for 3 months at a time, because they were extremely difficult birds to film. And technology wasn't quite there for some of them. Some of them start their displays like 2 hours before sunrise. I mean, it's not pitch dark, but there's very little light out there, and this is back in the mid-90s, 1995, 96. There weren't the same quality cameras that there are today.
And,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, before you asked, it was one of the great experiences in my life. Many working with David is just a joy, because he's so knowledgeable, and he's been in so many places, and he's such a good storyteller. Often very funny stories told against himself. But also to actually spend that amount of time in the rainforest of New Guinea, well, just watching these birds, and coming to terms with just how wonderfully complex and fascinating the natural world is. That was one of the highlights. There've been many highlights. We're going to come to another one that you were involved in. I hope we're going to go talk about that.
Yeah, soon, and people will also find out why our logo at Fixer Brazil is a hummingbird. It's not by chance. But I wanted to follow up on your you mentioning that David Attenborough is a good storyteller. Tell me a little bit what makes him a good storyteller. What are the key things? That is his approach, is the way he tells the stories, like the research, is a little bit of everything, all of this. He loves doing his own research. Of course, he's so in demand that often he can't do it. But so he has that fascination, and I think a fascination and enthusiasm that comes through the TV screen. You know that not only is he an authority, which he is, but there is passion and enthusiasm there, and that's like a magical ingredient. It just works on the audience, and they all go, ooh. And so David can talk about something that everybody else would think extremely boring, and it becomes fascinating. So he has that. He is very good at storytelling, just knowing how to set up the story, set up the characters, let things unfold, and always have a surprise or a tweak in the story. And that's what we all have to be. And if you want to make documentaries, is you have to be a storyteller. And curiously, it's curious to me anyway. It's one of the hardest things to learn, and one of the hardest things to teach. In fact, I think it might be almost impossible to teach storytelling. To me, that's just extraordinary, because to me, understanding how a phantom camera works is like, my God, that is complicated, and it's technically, wow. Well, storytelling, you just do it. Once upon a time, there was a beautiful princess, and you're off.
They've set up your character. Oh, there's a princess leader. I wonder what she looks like. She was very beautiful. And so you tell your story. And it's no different, I don't think, than the stories that we probably told each other in caves 10,000 years ago. It's just more difficult. Because if you want to make documentaries, or wildlife documentaries in particular, your work, the material is extremely hard to get. You have to spend an enormously long time to get the images you want. You can't, as you can in drama, go, well, let's retake that again and let's do this with slightly more blah, 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 because you're not dealing with actors who are extremely good at these things. So, yeah. Storytelling. I think there are people who are natural storytellers. Mr. Attenborough, or Sir David, is definitely one of those people, and other people find a way to do it, but it comes less naturally. Does that sort of make sense?
Completely sense. Yeah. When you mentioned that, I remember like myself telling stories to my daughter since they were little. There was. Now they're watching the wildlife films on TV. I mean, this is a progression of storytelling.
Well, it's the same thing. It is the stories.
Basically.
As you know, there are people who claim there are probably only a handful of real stories in the world. And that's sort of true, except that you can run variations on a theme forever. So the person who gets lost and found again, that's a story. Oh my God, someone's got lost, and now and you can see that people are using these, how do I say, original stories, if you like, and molding them to natural history. And that's a good thing, except you do have to be careful because you can anthropomorphize. You know,
correct.
Oh, the little bird's lost, and now, its parents come back. Well, that may not that may not be what's happening at all. And so you do have to be careful. Anthropomorphism is another word for it is telling fibs, really. I mean, because that's not what's going on with the animals, almost certainly. A few animals, maybe it does with chimpanzees, maybe whales. We don't understand whales that well, I don't think. But it's all out there. There's information galore. There's wondrous beauty in the world and the animals that live in it. You just have to craft a story and stick all the bits together.
Sounds easy when you say that, but it's a long way.
It's not easy. It's not easy at all. No.
Yeah, it's very hard. But we're going to get to some of behind the scenes, and you can tell some stories, the real behind the scenes. But I wanted to ask you about your professional career. Like around 97, you left the BBC and started your own company, Free Spirit Films. So how did you move in? How did you make that decision? I want to understand like your career evolving.
Okay. I would like to think it was done sensibly, calmly, logically. But it wasn't. It wasn't that way at all. I worked inside the BBC Natural History Unit. And enjoyed it immensely. It was, I mean, Attenborough would arrive. There were lots and lots of wonderful, creative people there, and you'd never want to leave. But what was happening, inadvertently, I guess, but what was happening was they kept promoting me, which you think, oh, that's very good, except when you get promoted out of filmmaking into management.
Right.
And in other words, I think the American expression, you become a desk jockey. You get stuck behind a desk, and you get a team, and you manage them, or you try to manage them. And I didn't want to do that. All I've ever since that time at Edinburgh University, all I've ever wanted to do is make films. And so it was obvious that that wasn't going to work out with the BBC, because they were determined that I should become a series producer, executive producer, or whatever. So I left so that I could continue to make films. It was it was that simple, really. Though it was an enormously risky thing to do, because when I left in '97, the industry was completely dominated by BBC and one ITV company called Survival. And so there wasn't lots and lots of independent companies or an independent business, if you like, ecosystem. It didn't exist. But luckily, after I decided to leave, I got offered a series by the BBC. So I walked out of one door and came in another one, really. And I didn't set that up. I was just lucky that they liked the thing I wanted to make. I was suggesting I was going to make. And so it was cushioned. It wasn't too drastic a change. And nowadays, there's lots and lots and lots of independent companies. And there's lots of people who you can just ring up and say, I need an editor, and you can find an editor. Well, in days gone by, they were all inside these big corporations, ITV, BBC. Now it's a much more interesting business environment, I have to say. And it does allow for greater diversity of approach to filmmaking and what a documentary is. So, it's a more interesting world, I think.
Gotcha. So let's go to the field. That's the place you love to be, like with the animals in the wilds, and in the forests and in the savannas or wherever. So I wanted to catch up on the film Hummingbirds, Jeweled Messengers, that is one of the most celebrated films you made, like narrated by David Attenborough and awarded with several international nature film festivals.
The birds feast on the copious nectar and in return carry away the plant's sticky pollen on their bills and pass it on to other flowers.
And this film reveals the extraordinary biology and behavior of hummingbirds and their ecological relationship with flowering plants. And part of the production involved filming here in Brazil in 2012, including sequences shot in the Atlantic Forest region at the coast of São Paulo, Ubatuba, and also in Espírito Santo State and the amazing Chapada Diamantina. So I have some behind-the-scenes photos of you filming hummingbirds here in Brazil. Let's have a look, and you can tell some of the stories that happened here during this project. This is filming hummingbirds in the cactus in Chapada Diamantina. Tell me about this species and what we're looking for.
Okay. What we were looking for, really, first and foremost, is, in my opinion, and others are quite welcome to disagree, but in my opinion, this is the most beautiful hummingbird in the world. It's also very unusual in its sense. It has gold and brilliant red. Yeah, there we are. That's a great sense of its iridescence, while most hummingbirds are kind of green-based. This one completely not. And it's a stunner, absolute stunner. And it's there we are, and that's the location. It doesn't look like much, but scattered among our feet and getting into our legs are lots and lots of spiny cactus whose flowers only appear in the afternoon. So the first day we spent a very nervous morning going, God, there's no flowers, there's no hummingbirds, nothing's happening here. There's Mike Potts, a brilliant cameraman, absolutely brilliant, taking a few stills there. But after we realized that the flowers only, and they literally grow out of the top of the mellow cactus, that's the genus, and there's nectar in them, and the hummingbirds know that, and as if by magic they appear in the afternoon, and we were able to film them, which was fantastic. That's me either pointing at some other interesting bird or saying that sun's way too bright. There we are. I think this is a Diamantina.
Correct, Chapada Diamantina. Yes.
And we selected this super dramatic place to give a sense of what the world looked like when hummingbirds first evolved, all back many million years ago. And we were fortunate that we didn't have perfect weather, so we got mist and clouds swirling around us, and it created an atmosphere that matched what we were trying to talk about. There you get some small sense of how dramatic and otherworldly Diamantina is. And it's a great location. And I must plug your company now and say you guys were just great at finding locations for filming. Absolutely brilliant. There we are. And you can that's Max in the middle from Austria.
Correct. Yeah.
And he was a technical genius that kept the Phantom camera, which is beside Mike there at the moment. Wow, look at that. Wonderful. We're bringing back great memories, this. But we were there to tell a story. What was interesting was we had having said one has to research and research and research. This is a story against myself because I didn't research enough. I didn't realize that the flowers only came out in the afternoon, but I don't know if anybody did know that. I'm not sure anybody has sat beside those cactuses to see that they did that. But what we also learned was hummingbirds are extremely scared of wasps. And there were lots of wasps coming into. There's a happy team again. Look at that.
With Renato.
I think happy and relieved, because it was always a great moment when we got the sequences in the can and we knew we had all our shots we needed to tell the story.
So we wanted to tell the story about the evolution of the hummingbird, and also
Correct.
So you needed this specific species there, and also the environment to show like the world, how the world was when they were evolving.
Yeah. Yes. The Diamantina gave you the environment, and then this hummingbird is one of the more advanced hummingbirds, so it appeared later in our storytelling. But we went to Ubatuba to film the saw-billed hummingbird. Very curious, funny little hummingbird with a really clunky kind of bill. Most hummingbirds have very fine pointed bills for going into flowers and feeding, but the sawbill not. It has a chunky bill, and it's more of an insect and spider catcher than it is a nectar feeder. So it was an important species for us. But we filmed it in Ubatuba, and again, a great location found. And I think Rick Simpson was involved as well, I think, in that time. There we go.
Yes. And now this is in the Pousada in Espírito Santo, where you were filming another species.
And with the son of Rushi, who was really the father of hummingbird studies. And his son, by pure accident, was involved with us, helped us film in this was a museum garden. There we are, and this is us in the grounds again. And so this is a bit of, one has to confess, this is a bit of cheating here going on, that we are using a syringe to add sugar water. And you must, if you do this, you must make sure the concentration is correct. If it's too diluted or too strong, it's dangerous to the birds. But we knew the correct, and so we would refill the flowers so that the hummingbirds would come back regularly. And this was simply to get a range of shots so that the editor would be happy at me and not throw things at me when I came in with not enough range of shots. And there's one hummingbird having come and fed, zooming off. And again, another view of that extraordinary Phantom camera that we ran it up to, gosh, no, what was it, Tomaz? I'm trying to think.
I remember some of the frames, 500, 1,000 or more.
You know what? We went for one of them, we went for 2,000
frames per second.
Most of it was 500 and 1,000, as you say. Yeah. And that was enough speed, even though the camera could go faster. But for some real, how those wings work, the extraordinary folding of the, rotating of the wings, we ran at 2,000 frames. That's me saying, I wish they were this big and life would be a hell of a lot easier. And there's the flower that you were just seeing being loaded up with sugar water. and in comes a happy hummingbird, thinking this has made my life very easy. I can just sit over there and feed these extraordinary birds. It's sugar. Remember, they drink their own body weight in sugar each day. It's just astonishing.
Some rain, dramatic rain with the hummingbirds.
Didn't we just get the most extraordinary rainstorm? Besides some flowering trees, beautiful flowering trees, and the hummingbirds kept flying through it, though of course they're so small, when a rain dot hits them it's quite something. But they shake like a doggy shakes when it gets wet. They're just amazing.
There you are, happy with the shots.
yes, looking, there's a laptop and we're looking at our rushes, and another, how extraordinary. Going back to the beginning of my career, we shot on film. You took the film cans with you, you loaded up, you had to load the magazines for the camera in a black bag and do it all by feel, by hand. And they had to be right. And if you loaded up wrongly, you got it wrong. If you didn't label things correctly, you're double exposed. And the biggest thing is you shot it, put it in a can, hopefully not exposed to light, and you brought it back after 6 or 8 weeks filming anywhere in the world. You took it back to the UK, you sent it to the laboratories, and a week later they would send you rushes which were low quality positives of what you shot. And then and only then, after you do come back, after all the money spent, there's no more money to redo it, did you look at your rushes. So I remember all of this because it's some of the most nerve-wracking days of my life, was sitting in a darkened room waiting for the projectionist to switch on the machine and discover whether we had a film or not, for goodness sake. And of course, I mean, if you it's a ruthless world. If you, I was going to use a rude word, if you messed up messed up your shoot, the doorbell didn't ring again, you didn't get offered another film. So there we are. But that, all of that, what a wonderful privilege to be able to spend time with these extraordinary birds, and to spend time with so many different animals and wonderful environments. A great privilege for which I will forever be grateful. And the people I've worked with, the places I've been, the animals I've filmed, have enriched my life in absolutely enormously. I recommend it as a way of life. I mean, for goodness, it's not a job. It can never be described a job. Filmmaking is a passion and a way of life. There we go. I've talked too long again. I'm always chatting too much. You have to tell me to shut up.
That's what we are here for, to listen to your stories and to your amazing experience on the field. I want to play a short clip of the Ubatuba filming, the hummingbirds. So we're gonna watch it. It's like 1 minute, and then we're gonna listen to your thoughts.
It's Ubatuba. It's the 4th of January morning in Mata Atlantica rainforest habitat, and for its Terramata hummingbirds. It's the story of the evolution of the hummingbirds, and this is our last shoot. We've been in the USA, we've been in Ecuador for 6 weeks, and now we're here in Brazil. Hummingbirds are just fabulous flying machines. They are the ultimate flyers, far outperforming other birds, bats, even insects, and they are jewels. They're beautifully colourful. So to be able to film them properly, we brought a camera called a Phantom, and it is able to run up to 2,500 frames a second in full HD. It's quite a most remarkable camera.
Oh, Paul I've known for probably 30 years now. Paul was a producer in the BBC for several years, probably 15 years I think. I was a freelance cameraman, so I got to work with Paul quite a lot. And we've developed quite a good relationship over the years, and we're still making films together whenever we get the opportunity.
I've been to Brazil several times, and to the Pantanal, to the Amazon. Brazil has been underrepresented in wildlife documentaries. There have been many, many more films from Africa, from Asia, from Australia. South America overall doesn't get a fair share, and Brazil in particular, because it is such a diverse country. It has such a wonderful range of animals. Many never have been filmed. And so I think the future for Brazil and wildlife documentary making is, the potential is enormous. It's great looking at this stuff again, actually. They're so beautiful, aren't they? And it's a perfect use of that high-speed camera. I mean, they're often used just for show, but it really was revealing how these birds fly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's no other way of doing it. Look, hummingbirds everywhere. What a place. I'd love to go back. Ubatuba was a great place. And there's our little mini jib, which allowed us to do moves with the birds. Brazil has been underrepresented in wildlife. I needed a haircut, there's no doubt. Wow. From Asia, from Australia. There it is. That's what we reckon is the most primitive of all the hummingbirds. Not me that says that, but the World Authority, a wonderful man, a German, Karl Schuckmann, and that's what he reckons, and he's the expert. And that's the thing, as a producer, director, you need to be a jack of all trades, but never try to be a master of them all, because there are scientists who are world authorities on things. There are naturalists and field biologists who've spent their lives beside these animals. There are cameramen who can do things, brilliant things that I can't do. Sound recorders the same, and so it goes on. You just need to have enough knowledge of all those areas that you can guide. But most of all, you need to tell stories. If you can tell stories, then you can find all the other talents out there. But finding storytellers, no. Well, there you go. Hen's teeth.
And in an interview, I did some research and read some of what interviews. You mentioned that what interests you most are stories also that contain a scientific revelation, something that gives the audience, you mentioned, like a wow moment. So yes. What do you mean by that? Tell me a little bit more about not only the storytelling, doing the research, and this wow moment that you look for.
Okay. Well, you should know, a wow moment should hit you on the head. You should know. So when you're doing your research and you suddenly find out that hummingbirds are frightened of wasps. Well, we found that out in the field, but that was still a wow moment. Another one was that hummingbird flowers are red. And everybody said, oh, well, that attracts the hummingbirds. But no, it's not that. It's that insects that would compete with hummingbirds can't tell red and green blind. So anything that's red looks the same as green, which means they can't see the flowers. So the plants are fooling the insects to allow the hummingbirds come in, not that the hummingbirds are attracted to red. And I thought, wow, that's quite extraordinary. So you do come across things in research and you go, wow, that's amazing. That's a revelation. That's new. And as new, it will amaze people. And that's always a good thing to do. You have to tell stories, but not all stories are good stories. I mean, some stories are dare I say it, boring, aburrido. I got up in the morning, I made a cup of coffee and I had a piece of toast. We're falling asleep right away. But that's a story. That's a series of events connected together, which is all what a story is, really. But a good story is I got up in the morning and my house had disappeared. You go, whoa, wait a minute, what's going on here? Now we're going. You've intrigued people. You found something new to say. And we had those moments with, as we say, the the ruby topaz hummingbird and the wasps, and we had it with the sawbill. That that this is where hummingbirds came from. This animal, and therefore we think hummingbirds would have started off as catching insects inside flowers, and then have slowly evolved to still do that to some extent, but depend more and more on nectar. And as they depend on nectar, which is super high energy, so they evolved into these extraordinary high-speed acrobats. Mm-hmm. So that was, and then it's just storytelling is a structural thing. What order do you put all this information such that it's not just information, it's knowledge, it's connected. But that's another story. They're all stories, but that's another one.
Yeah, and then at some point you started like teaching this to young people, like in the Escuela Internacional de Cine y Televisión in Cuba, where we met for the first time when in 2011, I think it was, I went there with Renato to do the wildlife filmmaking course with you. And then we connected, and after that you came to Brazil to film the hummingbirds, and we had the pleasure to work together. But tell me a little bit your experience. What moved you to teach like wildlife filmmaking, especially in Cuba, and tell me a little bit that environment, that amazing environment of the escuela in Cuba with international students, international professors connecting.
Yeah, no, it's a, well, I hope it's still a great place, though I hear things are not always as good as they could be, but it is, well, as you know, because you were there, it's absolutely a unique location. It's I can't think of anywhere else where they really are just 100% immersed in filmmaking. And that's largely because of where it is, because it's Cuba and it's a socialist or communist regime. They just don't have we can't do it, we don't have the money to do it. We'll find a way of doing it, and the students just work and work and work, and creativity is allowed at all times. So even if you're doing a craft, you're expected to think outside the box, and it's I think because I don't know how it's faring at the moment, but I heard, unfortunately, because of the embargo, they're struggling. If they're not struggling, I recommend it to anybody, because it is such a different experience. It's mind altering, it's mind opening. It's full of really great people, both the students and the teachers. And I say that even for you, Tomaz. And it was a great joy. You and Renato were star students, absolutely star students. And I seem to remember you made your film. Everybody makes a film after 3 weeks, which is completely nuts and absolutely in the style and ethos of the school, where you just don't say, no, we can't do it, we go and do it. And did you not make a film on reptiles with Louis?
I did, yeah.
Luis Beltrán wasn't it? He was the scientist who could just find snakes and lizards everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it was amazing. Like we had like 3 weeks. The first week learning to do the research and to work with the scientists and to write the script. The second week filming, the third week editing, and we did. Renato was in another group. He did also a film about the lizards, and it was very interesting because the film I did with the group I worked with was based on the food chain. So we wanted to show the insects, the lizard, and then the snake that might eat the lizard, and reveal not focus only in the lizard, but also in the other animals and other species. And then Renato in his group told in another film the story about how lizards arrived in Cuba, maybe in the leaves or in a coconut leaf floating in the ocean. So they had to capture those shots. So very different approaches and the storytelling, about the lizard, the endemic lizards there, Laura.
Yeah. No, you're bringing it all back to me, and yes, I mean it's a crazy schedule, but people work so hard. All the students just work at it, and put the hours in, and yeah, no, it's very, very. I enjoyed it enormously, and how did it come about? It came about, gosh, let me think. It came about because of Maxine Baker, who
Yes.
was the co-teacher, and she was already teaching there. She's a well, sadly, she died last year, but she was a leading documentarist in the UK. Not natural history. She didn't know one end of a bird from the other, but it didn't matter because that's not what her expertise was. She was just a great documentarist. And she had been teaching there, and pure accident, when I was making a wildlife film on Cuba, I sat with her. We were complete strangers, sat in joining seats on the flight to Cuba. And that was way back. And then about 3 years later, she said, come on, you've got to come and teach at the film school. I said, no, I ain't got time to teach at the film school. So she's very insistent. So I went and talked to the head of the school. And they said, oh, we would be very happy to have a wildlife course. And that was the beginning of it. Yeah, there you go. And
So
then,
you were lucky, and we all were lucky with you being there. We are so lucky that to be your students, and still today I'm learning in this chat that we're having here.
well, that's very kind of you to say it. I'm sure all the students would agree with you. Some of them would probably think, no, what is that silly old man talking about? But no, I really, I was surprised, but I really enjoyed teaching. And on the back of it, I taught at University of Salford up in Manchester, a 1-year postgraduate course. And then, and I'm still doing guest lectures, but I designed and taught a 2-year MA course at the National Film School here in the UK. And I set that up and ran it for 3 years, and then ran it part-time for 3 years. And now I'm still doing a week's work for them coming up in a couple of weeks' time, but I'm doing that amount of time, but I'm retired. There you go. It's a difficult word for me to say because I just love making films, but no, I'm also aware that you should hand over. You should hand over it's like a relay race. You hand over the baton and see where the genre goes. At the moment, as you probably know, natural history is not doing terribly well, but documentaries is doing much better. And one of the things, again, if anybody's thinking of joining the industry, is just be aware, like all industries, but it's more so, I think, in film, in documentary, it's cyclical. There are times when the phone never stops ringing. You must know this as with your fixer business, that you just can't do all the work. There's so much of it, and then there's no logic to it. Suddenly the phone stops ringing because nobody's got any money and nobody's making any films. And it's only the smart guys who survive through these kind of things. And you guys are obviously smart because you have done that. You've survived through the good and the bad times.
It's like the evolution. You have to evolve, you have to change to survive, adapt. Otherwise, you're extinct.
Yeah, no, it's a very good way of looking at it, and that is how the industry is. But it will come back because people are fascinated in nature. They're fascinated in the world around them, or I hope they are. It would be a very sad world if nobody was interested. And I think there's quite a lot of recent research that just being with nature is actually very good for people. It's just very good for their nervous systems, and that's where we belong. We don't belong in worlds full of straight lines and bright garish colors. We're in a world of subtle greens and wonderful curved shapes of leaves and flowers and all of that. But
Yeah.
And that's what I hope some of the documentaries celebrate. And yeah.
Sure. And here in Brazil, we have like some of the good cinematographers, some of the best cinematographers in the world for wildlife. For example, Christian Dimitrios, who worked with us in another project, the Brazil Natural History, the Wild Brazil. And also
Yes.
João Paulo Krajewski, who is also amazing. And also, for example, the still photographer Luciano Candizani, a personal friend of ours, is also amazing. And I did an interview with Christian Dimitrios in the previous episode of this podcast about, so one of the questions is about the new technologies and artificial intelligence, AI now, becoming big. And his take is that you cannot avoid using it, but wildlife films, maybe you use AI as a support, maybe to develop a scene before you go to the field and to film that. You can try to make it on AI and see how it works or how the camera position or anything, and then you go to get the real image, for example. So, or developing the scripts. That's what he were thinking about, the embracing AI, what he said. So I wanted to hear your thoughts about this, like watching from your perspective on the new technologies, like new cameras. At the time we filmed the Hummingbirds, the Phantom was a new camera, and now AI. How do you see the wildlife films evolving from now on?
Well, I think it's fascinating, and I'm sure everybody in the industry is looking at it carefully, hopefully carefully. I have a few concerns with it. I think the main one is it's going to be very, very easy to misrepresent what's happening, because you can use AI picture editing or just moving elements around. And as soon as you start doing that, is that a documentary anymore? I mean, we've always had, it's not black and white, because, you know, if you film something, you changed it. I mean, it's almost like quantum physics. You filmed it and you didn't film it that way, you filmed it this way. Well, that's not, you know, that is not what happened. It is your selection of what happened.
And you edit and everything, and you have a lot of work going on.
All of this is, but if you're doing that to guide someone to help tell the story, then that's okay. But if you're just doing it for drama, and I mean, there's an awful lot of AI produced videos out there already, and they are completely misrepresenting things. The other worry is, as you do that, so you create an appetite for more and more spectacular but untruthful events. So now we'll have wolves eating killer whales or all sorts of just craziness going on out there. And because the traditional, and kids I think would say boring, broadcasters like the BBC or CBS in America or ABC in Australia are no longer the prime source of information, people will be looking at these AI-generated false events because they look so realistic and believing that's what it is. And if they start sharing that, which is what kids do with social media, then that's my big concern. I think used as a tool responsibly, as Christian was describing, that all makes sense. You can, I mean, it's like in the Stone Age, we would do what was called a paper edit. You draw. Okay, that's the first image, and then you take another sheet of A4 and you draw that one, and then you'd look at them and go, yeah, they're all cut together, that's fine. And using AI to do that is much more sophisticated, and you're going to get a much better sense of what the final sequence will look like. But luckily, animals don't always do what you tell them to do, and so even the best plotted and planned AI will fail if the animal goes, no, don't do that. Sorry, mate, that's not in my contract. I'm a killer whale. I don't fly. Thank you very much. Well, because AI will allow you to do all of those things. I think it's partly my age, but I am worried concerned about what AI will do, because I might again sound old and somewhat tired and cynical, but human nature, if you look at what's happened in the past, look at all the what are people using social media for? Scamming and cheating and catfishing and all of these just awful things. So bring AI on, and all of those things are going to be so much easier to do. If they can, which they can, get your voice, and then they can call me and it sounds like you, and you say, will you come and talk for an hour? And I'll go, yes. And oh, by the way, what's your credit card number? That's my take on AI. It's drifting away from filmmaking, but I'm concerned about it. And that's because I'm a documentarist, and this will sound very old-fashioned, but documentaries ultimately have to tell the truth as best you know it. Now, I'm not an absolutist, but there is a truth out there, and there are falsehoods, and you have got to go follow the line of truth. It's easier to make documentaries by telling lies, because you can make up anything you want, and it's easy to make something up, while going out and actually filming it and showing it clearly is, as I said, it's a bloody hard way of making a living, is storytelling with film, but is also one of the most wonderful ways to spend a life.
Yeah, no, we have some big challenges ahead. That's why we need people like you, or like Christian, and like others, like to show the people the right path and the right way to use it, because there's gonna be people misusing it and doing some better strange things for sure. But I'm a little younger than you. I'm still more optimistic. But I see, like even in the past, when the technology evolved, of course, like now in social media, most of the things that you are scrolling on the phones is really crap and bad things. But that's why I'm producing this podcast with you, that's to spread the good news and to spread some good knowledge about reality and filmmaking and the conservation, because there is a big role since when you started, like reconnecting to when you started your career, like in these wildlife films, to show the people the natural world in which we live in. Like you said, we're human beings. We are used to big cities now, but like we belong to the nature. So there's still this important role of wildlife films, connecting people with the wild, and also with conservation. So I'd like to listen your thoughts about like the future of wildlife films, still playing this role in the future.
I think it will. I think it's the kind of just showing people the world and how beautiful it is. I think there is still a place for that, but less so in the sense that people travel more. So what was exotic is not quite so exotic now, but places like the highlands of New Guinea are still beyond most people's dreams of what it could look like. And so there is a very basic, straightforward need for people to just show you what these places look like, so you have some idea. But beyond that, there is a need to convey not the beauty of the world, but the power of science. So that all being able to find ways of showing people, popularizing science through filmmaking, will always be there. And more, I hope, and it is, I think they've done a very good job. The films are dealing with, not tackling, but dealing with conservation issues. Built into the film, not a little final moment, oh, and by the way, that animal's dead or gone extinct or whatever, but just making a whole film based around conservation. And why I say I'm pleased about it is they found a way to do these things without them becoming so depressing that you want to slash your wrists after you've watched the film. They found a positive way of looking at, well, you know, here's the issue, it's global warming, here are the solutions rather than here's the issue, isn't it dreadful, we're all going to die. That's not much cop really turning those things out. So I'm hopeful that that the conservation message will actually become stronger, but done very positively, showing people how beautiful the world is. And it was Attenborough said, unless you show people what the world looks like, what the animals look like, how can you expect them to save them when they don't even know they exist or how beautiful they are? So that role, that very old-fashioned role of this is what the world looks like, is still there. But there's also, I think, a space for, and this is curious because it's structural in terms of the BBC, is we talked about it right at the beginning. Bristol had wildlife documentaries. There they were. That was all in Bristol. And London had Horizon and science documentaries. And no, they were like patches, gang territories. So you didn't intrude into each other's territory, but it meant that you never dealt with what is the most exciting area, I think, of science, which is biological sciences. You know, not just giving us a beautiful film about lions, but actually going in and telling us all about the latest findings that lions, no, they're not diurnal at all. They do all their work at night, and that's why they're not lazy. They're sleeping because the daytime is their nighttime. And using all of these science stories to create a new middle ground, more informative, more story-driven, and involve lots of people and scientists as well. It doesn't just have to be blue chip. So there's room. I think there's room for, as you said it, for the genre to evolve.
Amazing. Thanks for the message for the future generations, like watching this podcast. So Paul, I'd like to stay one more hour talking to you, but it was great to revisiting your career, your films, and our collaboration filming here in Brazil. Thank you so much for doing this, and I hope that we can meet. Maybe you can visit Brazil again, and we go to Ubatuba to check the hummingbirds spot.
That would be. I would love to do that. Absolutely. And before you cut me off, I have to say it was a great pleasure working with you and Renato. Absolutely a pleasure. You were brilliant, and I'm delighted that you have a company, and I wish it every success it deserves. Continue to be a great success. Yeah, thank you. It's all right me having great ideas. Let's make a film on hummingbirds, but without people like you, those films would never get made. You know, you are the power behind the throne. How about that?
Thank you for your kind words, and again, that's why you have this amazing logo of the hummingbird here, inspired by the first production services that we did with you. So you're very important in our story here at Fixer Brazil. Thank you so much.
Not at all, Tomaz. What a great pleasure. It's been a great pleasure to talk with you and reminisce and just talk about what is a great way of life. Anybody still listening, become a filmmaker, become a wildlife documentarist. It's an important thing to do. It's also a great pleasure.
Thank you for all the inspiration, Paul. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
You too.